Okay, let's do it. We have 5.3 here, neuronal autoimmunity. So conditions where we attack our own nervous system, right? That's probably not a good thing. So the nervous system, it depends on rapid insulated conduction of electrical signals. So the wires that perpetuate these signals are the nerves, and are these these wires are insulated by a compound called myelin. All right, very, very important here. So normal anatomy states, let me go ahead and hit that focus. There we go. Normal anatomy states the central nervous system, we have oligodendrocytes that produce the myelin sheath, the wrapping around the nerves that provides insulation. In the peripheral nervous system, you have your Schwann cells or your neurolemmacytes that produce this myelin sheath. Okay? Again, this is just a fatty lipid composed substance that coats the nerves, allowing for a quicker conduction of the electrical signal. Myelin also possesses few MHC molecules, resulting in minimal immune traffic. Okay? In the case of multiple sclerosis, which is one of the diseases we're talking about today, we have chronic immune-mediated demyelinating of the CNS. So, for whatever reason, I build an immune response against the myelin that coats my nerves. So let's go to this little diagram here. In the white, I have this lovely little nerve drawing here with its synaptic terminals at the end here. So I generate some signal downstream from the cell body, and that will eventually get to the bottom where I release some chemicals to have an effect. Right? If this is for, say, a motor neuron, then I'll release some acetylcholine, and that'll tell this muscle to contract, or some kind of arc like that. I have this myelin intermittently, kind of like the snack. Like, have you ever heard of combos, the pretzels with the cheese or whatever, like quote unquote cheese in the middle? We kind of have those beads going down the whole nerve with little gaps in between. And what this allows for, I don't know the whole physics and chemistry going on here, but this allows for the electrical current to jump along those nodes. That's what the insulation provides. So it increases conduction speed at an alarming rate, which is very helpful. And if you think about how much is happening when you just flex the muscles in your fingers, right? If you ever dropped like a screw behind a couch, you know, something that requires fine motor skills, and all the little motions that are occurring for you to do that, every single muscle contraction is happening at almost like the picosecond intervals. So this is a really quick and delicate process. And we want fast conduction speed to allow that. So if I'm knocking these out, that's no bueno. No bueno at all. All right, so what are some of the links? Genetically, we have HLA, DR2 associated. Again, not a smoking gun, but these HLA genes say, hey, increase susceptibility. Environmental links. There is certainly what we call a latitude gradient to this disease. Higher latitudes, less vitamin D, more likelihood of multiple sclerosis. Also, EBV infection, kind of like another case of molecular mimicry. Some of these EBV infections can produce compounds that look similar to myelin. So now the immune system gets confused and says, hey, I thought this was an EBV affectation. That's why I mounted a whole response against it. When in reality, nope, it was just the myelin on your nerves. Smoking is associated, as well as gut dysbiosis. But EBV is a real strong indicator. Prior EBV infection, it's later on in this video, but I think it's 70%. Okay, some of the pathophysiology here. For whatever reason, your antigen-presenting cells start presenting myelin-derived peptides. So, not good at all. That means myelin is now enemy of the state. This activates some of your Th1 cells and your Th17 cells. Not concerned with the super specifics there, but we just have general inflammation and the breach of the blood-brain barrier. So now I have this inflammatory tone going in to my central nervous system. Again, that environment is immune privileged. We don't want that much inflammation there. That's where my nerves are sending all of my motor and sensory impulses. So now I have inflammation in that area, and that Yeah, that's scary. So beta cells eventually get recruited in this whole immune arc, and they secrete um, immunoglobulins against these myelin sheath compounds. Okay. Let's see here. Innate recruitment, we have the microglia. These are like the janitors of the central nervous system itself. We haven't talked too much about them. The central nervous system, because it is immune privileged, it has its own kind of immune microenvironment. And these are quicker to inflame, a more pro-inflammatory milieu, if you will. Milieu just means environment, setting. So more reactive oxygen species release and more nitric oxide release. Okay, so that brings in more of the peripheral macrophages since the blood-brain barrier is breached in this case. More pattern recognition on the front of DAMPs, PRRs, and AMPs. So if I'm bringing in more inflammation, I'm causing more damage. Damage releases DAMPs. Those damage-associated peptides are read by pattern recognition receptors, which causes the release of antimicrobial peptides. In this case, it's just more reactive oxygen species and proteolases and more inflammatory compounds causing more DAMP release. Another aspect of a positive feedback mechanism occurring here. I cannot stress how important that is to understand, and it will be on the Unit 5 test. Faux show. Okay, that's the breakdown there. Our cells start presenting myelin-derived peptides. That brings in the adaptive response. Your T cells start saying, hey, those are bad guys. Then your B cells come in and start secreting autoantibodies, furthering this negative process. So this is a breakdown of two things of central tolerance. Remember, central is referring to the schooling done at the primary immune organs. So for the B cells, that is the bone marrow. For the T cells, that's the thymus. So we messed up to some degree where in negative selection we are testing if the cell is autoreactive or not. Okay? The B cell gets a check, the T cell gets a check, and for whatever reason the checking process did not occur correctly, and an autoreactive lymphocyte was sent into circulation. Which is, it does happen. It's fine. Hopefully our peripheral tolerance can handle it. Our Treg cells should be able to note when something needs to be calmed down. When something is autoreactive, when something is hyperreactive, this usually nips it in the bud. In this case, this is lacking as well. So a breakdown of both arms of tolerance. Compromised blood-brain barrier. Again, this is accredited to the Th17 subtype. Not worried too much about that, just for completion's sake. And allowing white blood cell entry. So now this pro-inflammatory environment, the milieu, is causing a flood of these inflammatory cells. And again, your own myelin is the stimulus, which means there is no relaxation, there is no cessation to the inflammatory signal. If the myelin is deemed to be the problem, in this case it is, then that problem is not going to go away. You're not going to get rid of all your myelin. It's not possible. So, positive feedback. What's the treatment? Again, corticosteroids, that's going to pop up everywhere. Not a real fix for the immunopathophysiology going on here. Basically just a stopping of the prostaglandin inflammatory pathway. So that can help with pain, inflammation, and things of that nature. At a certain point, we'll need an actual fix here. So we have some immunosuppressant drugs that might assist in telling the immune system to calm the hell down. And rehabilitation is really important here, making sure if this is affecting a limb. I gave you guys my anecdotes, but it can affect limbs. And if it's a central nervous system disease, that means the peripheral nerve is almost untouched for all intents and purposes. So if we just get a little stimulation device and zap whatever downstream nerve is affected, well, maybe we can restore some quality of life and some range of motion there. This requires regular follow-ups. follow-ups because we need to track the progression of this disease. Okay? Remember, no real cure, so we just need to manage symptoms and treat as we go along. So what does the types of progression look like? Okay? 85% of MS is relapsing remitting, RRMS. So you have these flares of autoimmunity that's just tearing through your myelin, and then you get a little bit better. And then you have these tears and tears again, and you get a little bit better. So what does that look like? So let's go ahead and make a funny, a helpful graph. We have loss of function on the X or on the Y, and time on the X. We'll say this is our RMS. So neurological flare, I get a little bit better. Neurological flare, I get a little bit better. Flare. So the big thing to take away here is you get better, or you flare up, lose function, you get better, regain function, you do not regain 100% function. Okay? That would mean this would go all the way down here, and it does not. So this is great. The patient would probably be like, I feel way better than I did last month. Awesome. But it's important to have these baselines so we can track, how much motion or how much strength we're losing. Okay. So, relapse, we have the immune flare, then we relapse. Flare, relapse, flare. This is how 85% of cases look. The second case is RRMS without a stark relapse. So how this looks is you flare up and then you plateau. Flare up, okay. My arrow got confused. There we go. So it's like this. Can't hold it for too long or the lines like to snap together. So we flare and plateau. Flare and plateau and flare. So it's the same kind of deal, except you just don't get that reprieve. You don't get better. Okay? And then the worst, let's go ahead and note that here. Okay. Pick a new color. Let's go green. The worst is PPMS. Primary progressive. No relapses, no plateauing from the get-go. It's just bad news bears. Okay? So more aggressive and a way worse prognosis on this front. Because if you think about it, it's just if you don't have those gaps of plateauing or relapsing in between, then things will diminish far quicker. I guess, thankfully, folks have this most common, so this allows for more time for us to develop some treatment plans and mitigate symptoms and hopefully increase quality of life, whereas we don't have nearly as much time in this case. Okay, and then the epidemiology here. Again, you're not responsible for this. I just like giving you guys like the so what and the scope of it all. So 3 million people worldwide, pretty prevalent. A strong latitude gradient, so we see this in Northeast U.S., Canada, Scandinavia, that kind of thing. Female predominance, 3-1. And that discrepancy is increasing, so maybe 3.5 to 1 soon here, we'll see. Onset's 20 to 40, but it's very variable. But this is why I wanted to talk about MS. 30 to 50% increase in rates over the past decade. That's incredible. So there's obviously something going on here, some sort of stimulus, some sort of combination of factors that we need to get to the bottom of ASAP. Low sunlight exposure has been correlated, obviously not causation here, but a lot of proper immune modulation is part of the vitamin D calcitriol calcium pathway. I know for a fact, at least, the complement system we've referenced a couple times is a calcium-dependent network. So it's really important that you try and get out and get some sun every day if you can. All right, and then prior EBV infection, I don't have the percentage, I'm sorry, but is a strong precursor because of this relationship that it has with the peptide structure of myelin. So really interesting that there's only so many patterns that nature has used, and for some reason this virus has a similar peptide signature that myelin has. So very interesting, but a very good marker for a precursor. So that's my multiple sclerosis. Very interesting disease. A lot of cool stuff there to talk about. There's a really interesting budding field of neuroimmunology, and I believe out in San Diego at the Salk Institute, there's a lot of awesome research going on in there. So if you're interested in that, definitely look into it. It's a real budding field, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to want some answers to this ridiculousness here. So yeah, look into that and credit me whenever you get your Nobel Prize. All right. Just kidding. Credit yourself. All right, so next up we'll talk about Guillain-Barré syndrome. And this is kind of like the peripheral nerve system counterpart to the central nervous system multiple sclerosis. This is a little bit different though, so bear with me. So it's acute immune-mediated demyelinating neuropathy of the PNS. Following infection is the big kicker here. In almost all of these cases, this is 2 weeks after infection of Campylobacter, CMV, EBV, influenza, etc. You had some prior sickness that tricked your immune system. What do I mean tricked? This is a perfect case of molecular mimicry. We have a confusion between microbial, big word here, lipooligosaccharides, and the gangliosides on your peripheral nerves. Lipo, fat, ligo, just means a chunk, oligo, like a small chunk, and saccharides is sugar. So just a fatty sugar membrane tag. Don't overthink it. Ganglioside, so another sugar tag. So basically what it's saying is that we have tags on our myelin that look pretty similar to these tags on microbial membranes. So now we have a molecular mimicry case, and the immune system gets flared up, confuses these for my myelin tags. And now I'm attacking my peripheral nerves. This is the most common cause of acute flaccid paralysis in adults. So it just comes out of nowhere, acute, boom, onset. Why can't I use my arm? That's got to be a crazy sensation to have. Okay, pathophys here. We create autoantibodies. The beta cells produce anti-ganglioside antibodies because they are confused. They've been presented the lipooligosaccharides, and they're like, close enough. Wrong, not close enough. Now you're attacking my musculoskeletal nerve, or my musculocutaneous nerve, and now I can't use my bicep. Okay, what the heck? So I bound my myelin, and I'm hurting my nerves. I recruit my neutrophils, macrophages, and my complement system, ultimately convening in the membrane attack complex. So now I'm throwing all these swords at the myelin sheath. Not good. Now I don't have conduction, or a losing speed of conduction, rather. So losing that myelin removes that saltatory conduction. That was the fancy word for jumping along the neuron. If I'm removing this, then I have to go through the regular old path, which is still quick in our frame of speed, but not very quick in terms of the frame of reference of nerves. Cool thing about this ailment is that the axons are typically preserved, enabling patient recovery. So once the pathogen causing the mimicry is removed, the response wanes. Who's wane? I'm just kidding. The response wanes. It decreases now that I've removed the pathogenic stimulus. Okay. Guillain-Barré treatments. So I like bringing this in because this is a cool concept. And it brings us back to unit, what was that, 2? Yeah, 2. Plasmapheresis. So I've got nastiness in my blood. I have autoantibodies. Let's do plasmapheresis. Filter out my plasma. Filter out the nasty autoantibodies. And then maybe add in some helpful antibodies that help get rid of the infection and help get rid of these noxious antibodies. To hopefully facilitate the removal of whatever stimulus is causing this paralysis due to the molecular mimicry. we need to monitor the respiratory patterns here. If the phrenic nerve is one of the nerves targeted peripherally, that is really, really bad. The phrenic nerve innervates your diaphragm. Your diaphragm. You're not breathing without proper diaphragmatic contraction. So that's very, very bad. Definitely know that relationship there. Big time. Very important. Same thing with autonomics. So you can't tell your heart to decrease its heart rate. You can't tell your stomach to secrete more pepsinogen. You can't tell your blood vessel to open up or relax on cue. These are smooth muscle-mediated mechanisms. These are autonomic mechanisms. I don't have control over them. They just happen automatically. And that is due to my sympathetic nervous system. Let's go a little smaller here. That's due to the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. I'm not going to get into all the anatomy here because this is pretty complex, especially the sympathetic side of things. A big one that you should know, though, and I'll go ahead and say, is the vagus nerve. A huge chunk of the parasympathetic system, and this is the arm of the autonomic system that is involved with rest and relaxation. So if you think back to caveman times, when you're not running from a bear, when you've just had your meal and you're resting and digesting, that a lot of those signals are transmitted by the vagus nerve. So if this is knocked out due to being attacked or due to the myelin around it being attacked, then maybe my mechanisms that are saying or telling my heart rate to calm down aren't getting through, or telling my blood pressure to drop. Maybe that signal's not getting through because this is all messed up. So these are things we have to note and monitor in these cases. Corticosteroids, largely ineffective due to this being heavily autoantibody mediated. 70 to 80% make a full recovery within a year, so that is really cool to see. Those axons are preserved once we remove the noxious antibodies, not to mention the noxious bacteria causing the confusion of and causing those antibodies to be created in the first place. Once those stimuli are removed, then things go back to normal in most cases. Some of the epidemiology here. This one is a very, very rare. So because of that, it's a uniform distribution. You're just rolling the dice on an infection, and unfortunately, you might win the jackpot of your immune system confusing microbial tags for myelin tags. Risk increases with age. Your immune system wanes with age, as we talked about with immunosenescence. Slightly male leaning, so the first example of that. Weird thing to cheer for, but there you go. 70% of cases follow infection. That's the big takeaway here. Big smoking gun. We do have something I want to note. Rare post-treatment trigger. So surgery, trauma, and vaccination. These are rare from the rare. So give me a rare to the second power, or maybe even third. I do see this brought up a lot. Just want to note, sure, this is a potential. Some vaccines do have attenuated viruses or bacterial peptides or strings within them. So that is a light infection. And what did we say? 70% of these follow infection. So sure, there might be a reaction here, but it is extraordinarily rare from a disease that's already rare. So I just wanted to get that out. You might see that, and it's not wrong. It could happen, but, think of the numbers. Okay. And then you always have the iatrogenic, who knows what's on the hospital floor or what, or whatnot. So those are just to note, but most of these are usually coming from a weird infection that you had that made your immune system confused. Alrighty, so that's the breakdown there. We had Guillain-Barré and we had MS. I think that's it. Yes, it is it. Alrighty, cool. Please let me know if you have any questions. This is 5.3. So we're almost done for the semester. Goodness gracious. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Have a good day.